Impostor Syndrome, the quiet thief of confidence. Most people imagine self-doubt as something loud and obvious, a shaky voice, a nervous glance, a visible lack of confidence. Impostor syndrome is sneakier. It wears a lab coat, earns promotions, publishes papers, and still whispers, "Any minute now, they'll figure you out." It is the psychological experience of believing you are less competent than others perceive you to be, despite clear evidence of ability and achievement. And yes, it has convinced Nobel laureates, surgeons, professors, and that one coworker who somehow knows everything that they are frauds. Imposter syndrome is not a mental disorder. It is a pattern of thinking, feeling, and behaving that emerges at the intersection of psychology, social learning, and the brain's threat detection machinery. To understand why it is so persistent and so convincing, we need to explore how the mind interprets success, how the brain processes threat and reward, and what experiments reveal about our relationship with competence and self-belief. The psychological roots. When success feels like a mistake. The term imposter phenomenon was introduced in 1978 by psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes while studying high-achieving women. Their participants consistently attributed success to luck, timing, or deception rather than ability. Since then, research has shown that imposter syndrome affects people of all genders, cultures, and professions. At its core, imposter syndrome is driven by a distorted attribution style. Psychologically, people tend to explain events in one of two ways. Internal, I succeeded because I'm capable, or external, I succeeded because I got lucky. Those prone to imposter syndrome habitually externalize success and internalize failure. A good outcome is dismissed as coincidence. A bad one is treated as proof. This pattern is often linked to perfectionism. Perfectionists set unrealistically high standards and equate worth with flawlessness. Because perfection is unattainable, every achievement feels incomplete. If you think competence means never struggling, then struggling becomes evidence of fraudulence. Ironically, the more knowledgeable you become, the more you realize how much you don't know. A phenomenon related to the imposter's cousin, the Dunning-Kruger effect, though in reverse. High competence breeds awareness of complexity, which breeds doubt. Social comparison also plays a starring role. Humans evaluate themselves relative to others, but imposter syndrome encourages comparisons with the most competent people in the room. It's like judging your singing voice by standing next to Beyoncé and concluding you should never hum again. Learning to feel like a fraud. Development and environment. Imposter syndrome often begins early. Family environments that overemphasize achievement, praise intelligence instead of effort, or send mixed messages. You're special, but don't mess this up, can teach children that worth depends on performance. When success becomes an expectation rather than an accomplishment, it loses its emotional reward. Educational and professional systems can reinforce this mindset. Competitive environments, constant evaluation, and cultures that reward confidence over curiosity create fertile ground for imposter feelings. Being part of an underrepresented group can intensify the effect. When someone does not see people like themselves represented in positions of success, self-doubt easily morphs into self-blame. Psychologically, the mind tries to maintain a coherent self-image. If someone secretly believes, "I'm not good enough," then success creates cognitive dissonance. Rather than updating the belief, the brain often reinterprets reality. The achievement must be wrong, temporary, or accidental, because changing a core belief is mentally expensive. Behavioral patterns. How imposter syndrome sustains itself. Imposter syndrome does not sit quietly. It drives behavior. Two common responses are overpreparation and avoidance. Some individuals compensate by working excessively, double-checking everything and pushing themselves to exhaustion. Others procrastinate or avoid challenges, reasoning that failure would confirm their fears. Strangely, both strategies reinforce imposter feelings. Overpreparation leads to success, but success is attributed to effort, not ability. Of course it went well. I worked myself into the ground. Avoidance, when it leads to failure, feels like confirmation. Either way, the underlying belief remains intact. It's a psychological self-sealing system, impressive in its efficiency and terrible for mental health. There is also a reluctance to accept praise. Compliments are deflected, minimized, or treated with suspicion. Praise threatens the internal narrative, so it must be neutralized quickly. If imposter syndrome had a motto, it would be, "Thank you, but you're mistaken." The neuroscience of feeling exposed. While imposter syndrome is shaped by experience, it is executed by the brain. From a neuroscience perspective, it involves heightened threat processing and altered reward integration. The amygdala, a key structure involved in detecting threat, plays a central role. Social evaluation, being judged, assessed, or observed, activates the same neural circuitry as physical danger. For individuals with imposter tendencies, success does not quiet this system. Instead, it can amplify threat. Now, there's more to lose. Functional imaging studies show that people with high self-doubt exhibit increased amygdala activation during performance evaluation tasks. At the same time, regions involved in cognitive control, such as the prefrontal cortex, are recruited to suppress anxiety and maintain performance. This creates a paradox. The brain is doing extra work to appear competent while feeling unsafe. Reward processing is also disrupted. Dopaminergic pathways, which help encode pleasure and reinforcement, respond less robustly to positive feedback in individuals with chronic self-doubt. In simple terms, their brains are bad at logging success. Achievements fail to update self-concept because the reward signal is weak or overridden by threat signals. This imbalance explains why reassurance rarely cures imposter syndrome. The brain is not lacking evidence, it is misclassifying it. Experiments that reveal the imposter mindset. Experimental psychology has repeatedly demonstrated how people misinterpret their own competence. In classic studies on self-assessment, participants often underestimate their performance when tasks are ambiguous or when standards are unclear, conditions common in real-world work. One notable line of research involves attribution manipulation. When participants are subtly encouraged to attribute success to skill rather than luck, imposter feelings decrease. This suggests the experience is not fixed, it is cognitively malleable. Other experiments explore stereotype threat, where awareness of negative stereotypes about one's group impairs performance and increases self-doubt. Claude Steele's work showed that when identity-related pressure is removed, performance improves. This provides experimental evidence that imposter feelings are not internal defects, but context-sensitive responses. Neuroscience experiments using feedback-based learning tasks reveal that individuals with high imposter traits update their beliefs more strongly after negative feedback than positive feedback. In Bayesian terms, their brains assign greater weight to errors than successes. If learning were a courtroom, failure would be the star witness and success would be dismissed as hearsay. Why smart people get it? Worse imposter syndrome disproportionately affects high achievers because it requires a certain level of insight. Recognizing complexity, uncertainty, and nuance is a sign of intelligence, but it also erodes the comforting illusion of mastery. The more you learn, the more visible the horizon of ignorance becomes. Experts also operate in environments where feedback is delayed, ambiguous, or political. Unlike a math test, real life rarely offers clear confirmation that you are doing it right. The brain, craving certainty, fills the gap with doubt. Ironically, people who truly lack competence often display unwarranted confidence. They have not yet learned enough to know what they don't know. Imposter syndrome, then, may be less a sign of inadequacy and more a side effect of intellectual honesty, albeit an emotionally exhausting one. Rethinking the imposter narrative. Overcoming imposter syndrome does not mean eliminating self-doubt. Doubt is a useful cognitive tool. It promotes learning, humility, and caution. The goal is to prevent doubt from mutating into self-erasure. Psychological interventions focus on reframing attribution patterns, normalizing struggle, and integrating success into identity. Neuroscience suggests that repetition matters. Repeatedly acknowledging achievement helps recalibrate reward circuits. Socially, open conversations reduce the illusion that everyone else is effortlessly competent. They are not. They are Googling things too. Perhaps the most effective shift is redefining competence. Competence is not omniscience. It is the ability to learn, adapt, and recover from error. Feeling uncertain does not mean you are an imposter. It often means you are paying attention. Conclusion. The fraud that wasn't imposter syndrome thrives in silence, comparison, and impossible standards. It is sustained by cognitive habits, reinforced by social structures, and amplified by neural threat systems doing their best to protect us from embarrassment, rejection, or exile from the tribe. Unfortunately, the brain is a bit dramatic and treats a mildly critical performance review like a saber-toothed tiger. Understanding imposter syndrome through psychology Behavioral neuroscience and experimental research reveals a crucial truth. It is not evidence of incompetence, but of a mind grappling seriously with complexity and expectation. The feeling of being a fraud is not a diagnosis. It is a misinterpretation. And if you ever suspect that everyone else has it all figured out, remember this. The imposter thought is not, I don't know everything. It's, I'm the only one who doesn't. That thought, at least, is demonstrably false.